Most people think what's happening around the bad rhetoric for South Africa is something that only matters domestically. Living here in South Africa, I'm seeing all of the tweets and the memes and the reels of how something bad is happening. Meanwhile, white South Africans, Afrikaners, and black South Africans are celebrating December, which is the lifestyle, this festive season here in South Africa. Some people think that this is only a domestic issue, maybe even regionally at best. But that assumption is exactly why what's happening right now must be paid close attention to, not only here in South Africa, but abroad, globally, and very much so across the diaspora. South Africa isn't being targeted because it's weak. It's being targeted because it is one of the most strategic countries of our lifetime. It's being targeted because it's strategically powerful, and it's strategically powerful in a world that is shifting away from US dominance. When this happens, power becomes an inconvenience to those that were formerly in that position. And so today I want to break down exactly why South Africa has been and become a pressure point for the West, and why narratives matter more than sanctions, and why the global diaspora needs to pay close attention to what's happening now. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Ashley Cleveland. If you're new to this channel, welcome. And if you're not new, welcome back, family. It's been a while. And of course, I have my notes, but for those that are joining us and you're new, my name is Ashley Cleveland. On this channel, Ashley in Africa, I share insights for smart money investors that are interested in diversifying their wealth across the continent of Africa, in East, South, and even West Africa. I help investors do this with a due diligence process that most investors do not even know exists. One that encompasses tax, immigration, and estate planning, so that you're investing with strategy and not stress and emotion. And so if this type of content resonates with you, be sure to like this video, share it with someone else who finds value in it, and of course, subscribe if you enjoy this content and more like it. I've got my notes, and I really want to talk about why the President of America, Donald Trump, is really trying to destabilize South Africa's reputation globally. And it's not because he's just throwing a tantrum. It's not because he's got an issue with the current political powers in place. This is a bigger issue. And I want to break this down to you after having my own experience in Lomé, Togo for the 9th Pan-African Congress. I got to see up front and personally how powerful South Africa is in the room of global leaders, ministers, diplomats, prime ministers, presidents. South Africa is strategically positioned as one of the biggest superpowers in this next geopolitical shift. But I want to break this down, frame this into some context so that you can understand why this matters for you, especially for investors looking to purchase property or start business or invest in South Africa, or all of the above. All right, so let's jump in. So this is not about, like I said, personalities, tweets, tantrums, theatrics. This is about geopolitics. And I know for my folks in the US, sometimes this is a foreign concept to us because we're really not informed on global politics. We're informed on how powerful America is and how every other country is unsafe or a threat, right, to the US. And so when there is a global transition, every time there is a global transition, reputational warfare comes before the actual conflict or the actual downfall of an empire, right? This comes before the economic or the political collapse. It happens first. You want to undermine the credibility before you actually undermine the capacity of a country. And so South Africa is at a really unique crossroads because it is uniquely positioned in many economic conglomerates and many economic blocks. It is uniquely influential. And of course, that influence is challenging the current and what is to be old world order. Okay, so reason number one why South Africa's role in the multipolar world threatens the powers of the West. So South Africa is one of the few African countries that I mentioned that is not aligned to just one specific economic power block, right? They operate inside the BRIC system, engages in the G20, which essentially they hosted the last G20 and it was excellent. Heard nothing but amazing things about the G20 being hosted in Johannesburg and Pretoria. They are a leader within the African Union. I saw this up in personal, close and personal for myself, where ministers, diplomats, excellencies were reaching out to South Africa for their inputs on policy, for their thoughts around different, political leaders, and like they are leaders within the African Union, and they maintain diplomatic relationships across the US, Europe, South America, China, Russia, and the global South. So this positioning that South Africa has is not just on the continent of Africa. They are a global powerhouse with global influence, and that positioning matters because, of course, when you are attempting to destabilize a country that is really immovable, you attempt to do so at asserting a reputational break that is, one, completely false, but it's also something that is not tied to their global influence. And so in a multipolar world, which we now live in, right, there are many powerful blocks, economic blocks and country blocks in our world today. No longer are we living in the days of America being the powerhouse, the most powerful country of our time. When this happens, countries that can convene, that can translate, and that can negotiate across blocks, across borders, and across continents become essentially the power players, the brokers of power in this new multipolar system. South Africa does exactly that. And so whether we're talking about administrations or political movements, these things are rooted in unilateral leverage, and that type of flexibility, that type of power is threatening to the old powers that are clearly in the comments of South Africa on a day-to-day basis. It's threatening to them because they cannot control the influence that South Africa has. So trying to destabilize that influence weakens their ability to speak for African rooms or for African nations when in these rooms. And I think that that is kind of the goal, obviously, but as I mentioned, and it's not perfect, right? But being in these rooms, seeing Africa's influence, South Africa's influence, not just in this Pan-African Congress. There were people there from Geneva. There were people there from France. There were people there from Canada, South America, Uruguay, Colombia. There were some Asians there. I'm gonna assume they're Chinese. I don't know why, I'm just gonna assume, but essentially South Africa was at the helm of every conversation and took a leadership role when it came to getting information and insights for policy and upcoming policy change and recommendation. Okay, so let's move on, right? Because I'm going a bit deep into that, but the next thing is that South Africa legitimizes African sovereignty on the global stage. I said this when I originally moved to South Africa, that what I see in South Africa and what I saw when I made my move almost 3 years ago was that South Africa showed that development, urbanization, a rise in middle class, and global, in a global, let's say, international metropolitan can happen on the continent of Africa. They are a proof point for the sovereignty of the continent of Africa, and they do something deeply uncomfortable for systems that are built on hierarchy and that are built on taking from the African continent. South Africa has proven that African nations can operate with the institutional credibility. Now, I know my South African family, you guys are super critical and very patriotic, but when you see the institutional credibility, the deep markets that are here, the democracy, I mean, today is, National Reconciliation Day, a day where South Africans recognize the challenges that they've had and the challenges that they've overcome, and they celebrate today going into the holiday season. And so these type of, independent courts, world-renowned constitutions, right? Sophisticated constitution, deep diplomatic experience, capital markets that are functioning, and then a global corporate integration. You've got companies from all over the world based here in South Africa. South Africa now disrupts the narrative that Africa must be managed rather than self-led, self-sustained, self-centered. Right? That they must be managed rather than partnered with or collaborated with. And so this legitimacy that South Africa has developed over its short time and its short independence is shifting Africa's bargaining power and what Africa can do around trade, around energy, around finance, and geopolitical alignment. So attempting to undermine South Africa's reputation is an attempt to undermine the legitimacy of African growth without just confronting it directly on. And, this is the underlying issue. Not that there is a genocide happening in South Africa, but that South Africa has taken the reins and decided to build despite and with partnerships in the direction that they decide to go, regardless of what the world thinks, specifically the US thinks about it. All right, so is this resonating? Is this type of content helpful? I know I speak a lot about the lifestyle of South Africa, and of course that trumps it all. No pun intended, but it essentially is not just lifestyle. This is about geopolitics, and I'm going to talk about that and why choosing to migrate somewhere based on geopolitics is a great strategy that the diaspora often misses. Investors don't miss this. All right, so hope you're finding value in this. Be sure to like this video below. All right, so reason number 3, economic gravity creates political leverage. So South Africa, it's not just politically influential, it's economically influential. One of the strongest economies in Africa and in the global South. It's anchoring for so many international companies to have their African headquarters here. Walmart has just launched 2-3 stores here in South Africa. Canva has just set up its Africa office in Johannesburg. We've got Spotify, Google, right? These businesses are here, Amazon. And South Africa is an anchoring location for these global businesses. And the financial markets are absolutely very sophisticated, along with the legal frameworks, which is something that I help our clients with when they decide to invest in South Africa, making sure that they're protected with their investment and that they're protecting their legacy in the event that they want to, pass their investments on to their children, or maybe even repatriate their funds to another country. These networks allow more movement, and they influence investors' decisions far beyond just the borders and the lifestyle. And the capital that flows through South Africa into the rest of the continent of Africa is done so in a way that it's structured legally with the frameworks that are based in South Africa, and other countries are following suit. Policy signals that South Africa is initiating are rippling to the rest of the continent, and however you look at that and however you see that for countries that are looking to develop and they're mirroring South Africa, they're taking away the great and they're, like say leaving what maybe doesn't work for them. But either way, if you're attempting to weaken the confidence of South Africa, then you introduce friction into the entire African investment ecosystem, which essentially is confusing to the average person. Meanwhile, these big corporations and these big banking institutions are continuing to fund projects where the foreign direct investment is higher than ever. But meanwhile, they're trying to convince you that terrible things are happening in South Africa, but guess who's winning? The corporations. And so why should you care? Well, as the African diaspora, South Africa functions as a strategic base. It's why I decided to make my base here in South Africa and diversify across East and other countries in South Africa, in Southern Africa. It's where the investment, the residency, the legal, and the continental frameworks access and convene together, right? And so this is how and why we always recommend people looking at systems that are going to protect them long term. And it's why South Africa is such a desirable investment location for the diaspora and global investors as a whole, because the frameworks are very familiar, but they're deep. And they're done so in a way to not only protect South Africa, but to protect the investor as well as the entities that are supporting, whether it's attorneys or bankers or advisors or accountants or all of the above that we help our clients work with. These type of access points essentially give investors the confidence that they need. And so when the narratives are distorted like that, it makes people think that these type of due diligence processes don't exist, but they do. And they do in such a fantastic way that South Africa still is one of the most highly invested countries in Africa with foreign direct investment. So let's not let the bad press be stronger than our desire to invest in a growing market in Africa. Let's not miss out, because fear will replace your strategy. And that replacement of your strategy essentially is going to give you nothing and leave you on the sidelines, watching other people invest in a continent that you desire to live and do business in. And so that is essentially the real objective of this bad mouthing, this narrative of nonsense. This is not what's happening in South Africa. And so in closing, let's talk about what is actually happening. This is not the moment that South Africa is going back towards its quote unquote colonizers. I think I've heard that said in the comments. South Africa, this is also not about emotions, right? This is about understanding power structurally and the way in which it looks geopolitically. South Africa is influential, not just because it can convene the countries on the continent of Africa, but it can convene the biggest economies in the world through the BRICS economic group. It can engage and convene the G20, right? And it's not perfect. There is no country that is perfect. There is no country on this earth that is perfect. But South Africa essentially has positioned itself to be one of the most powerful countries in the world. And, your boy is mad. So the question is whether you understand why this conflict matters and whether you're positioning yourself ahead of the narrative or just reacting to it after the fact. Because as I mentioned, I'm here on the ground. What I'm seeing inside of these rooms where confidential conversations are happening, I had no idea the global influence that South Africa had. And it's not just about the lifestyle. Now I realize why I was called to this country and the political position for what is happening and what will continue to take place over the next century. South Africa is positioned as one of the best countries to live in. And I stand by that. And so if you understand how global shifts happen and how Africa is rising, right? The diaspora strategy that, intersects not with just lifestyle, as I mentioned, but real practical ways that your investment is going to be not only protected, but is going to grow over this next, shift in geopolitical power, this channel is for you. Our calendar is currently closed. We're only working with a select number of investors. But if you want to apply to see if you are in a position to strategically invest across East and Southern Africa with an interest in South Africa, be sure to apply via the link below. And I look forward to having our team talk to you, learn more about you, and see if it's a fit. But if it's not, make sure that you're studying the markets that you're interested in. You're making moves, not just on emotion or DNA, but you're looking at the geopolitical shift that's happening, and you're questioning whether you're in an environment where the power is flowing in or flowing out. I hope you found value in this video. Until the next time, I'll see you soon.